Welcome back to So, What's Your Process, the show where we talk with creatives from all different fields about what they do and how they do it. I'm Kyle Dalsimer.
And I'm Allie Dalsimer.
And Allie, we've got a really exciting guest today, don't we?
We do indeed. Today's guest is a friend of mine. He studied creative writing at Haverford and Bryn Mawr, and then went on to study at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. He is the author of the best-selling and highly popular Ben Blackshaw series of maritime thrillers. He's an award-winning film and television screenwriter for shows such as The Discoveries, The New Detectives, and The Bureau. And he's got an exciting new project that I don't want to go into right now because I know we're going to get into. So welcome to the show, Robert Blake Whitehill.
What a pleasure to be with you.
We are so excited for you to be here today.
Thank you. It's just, I've been looking forward to the conversation ever since we scheduled.
Yay. All right.
Amazing.
All right. Well, I know Kyle is super excited. He's had all these questions lined up. So I'm going to let you get started.
Yeah, I wanna take it back, sort of start early and then build in. I'm very curious. So you studied at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, which for people who don't know has a very good argument of being the best drama school in the world. And you were an acting student there.
Indeed, and I invested further in acting at the Neighborhood Playhouse School of the Theater in New York, with the privilege of studying with Richard Pinter and Sandy Meisner himself.
Wow.
That is just some of the top acting training I think that anyone can ever ask for, and I'm very curious about your process. I read an interview where you said on your transition from being an actor to writing, you said, I can write whenever I want without waiting for a casting director to call, which was really interesting to me. But I'm curious about that transition for you and what that acting background has done to enhance you as a writer, and what things you've pulled from that training.
I love the question. And it's integral to my process. When I studied acting, I was, of course, inculcating some of the very best writing for the stage for English language, hands down, whether it was at the Neighborhood Playhouse or the Royal Academy, where the focus for me for that time there was Shakespeare. I was getting the very best stuff, just steeping it in it and letting it become a part of me. And they would always pick scenes that were not the most subtle. There was lots of emotional depth to dig into, and I found that very valuable to me. So while I was learning to act and studying all this great writing that was getting pulled in from all corners of English language work for the stage, I was just filled with the rhythm of the works. And then after the Neighborhood Playhouse, I was auditioning, and that's fine. A lot of the auditions I drummed up for myself. Some I would get through calls from folks who knew me, and that's all well and good. But I think one of the keys is, I had a lot of time between auditions if I were waiting. And I had settled in Montclair, New Jersey, which was about a 40-minute bus ride away from New York City. And for many, that's a hop, skip, and a jump. But for me, discovering slowly but surely that I'm kind of a homebody, that was a death knell for my work as an actor. And I found myself very comfortable in the setting at home, in front of a keyboard. And it's not that I couldn't act, and it's not that I still wasn't acting. It's just the audience was nobody but me. Because an integral part of my writing process, particularly for dialogue, but also for the narration, is just standing up and saying a line out loud. And is it sayable? Is it ringing true? Do I feel empowered? Does the actor side of me feel empowered saying that line? And there are craft tricks like putting the most potent, impactful words toward the end of a dialogue sentence. But similarly for the narration portion, the narrative portion, I wanted to make sure that the lines were ringing. I discovered that I have a little bit of a thing for alliteration, which I try not to abuse. but it crops up sometimes, and that's just how my brain works. So the acting was crucial to my process as a writer. And I think it has helped not only in writing fiction, the books, the Blackshaw books, but also in writing screenplays, of course, which can be heavier on the dialogue. But you still need to make sure that the way that you're crafting the stage directions are impactful, interesting, short, declarative, fun to read.
That is fascinating.
That is
And
actually
I
fascinating.
think there's such an interesting little tie there, talking about training with Sanford Meisner of the Meisner technique, which I think probably about half of the actors working today consider their main acting practice. And that there's a lot in that theory of acting about repetition. So for you, like getting up and actually verbalizing your lines, that's fascinating, and something I'd never heard of or thought of before. I want to touch even closer into this. I'm curious about what your process in building a character as an actor versus creating a character that you are writing, where the parallels were for you, and what skills applied in both, and maybe what didn't.
Working into a character as an actor, it's learning the lines, talking with the director about the beats that they envision and what emotional transitions might be happening where. I'm not doing it alone. I'm working with the actors who are sharing the stage with me, and I with them, and the director. And costume helps. So it's a little bit spread out and from the outside in. Now, as a screenwriter, as a novelist, I get little cheats that can really help. There are lots of actors out there that kind of remind me of the characters that I'm creating. And I kind of cast my characters in the books or in the screenplays from actors that I admire and respect. And I can kind of write for them, but with any luck, write in a way that's innovative and interesting, so they don't feel like they are redoing something that they've already done. Unless, of course, they're in a big old franchise and they don't mind, because the Marvel and DC money is crazy. And that allows them to afford to do smaller projects, which are just wonderful. So every tentpole Marvel comic book character movie has its place, because it serves the smaller projects that somebody might be involved in, like me. So I might have an actor in mind, and then I can hear their voice, and that's very helpful. Another way to draw upon an interesting character trope, if I've got a character in mind, is I start, please don't think I'm crazy, at horoscopes. And I look at the types of people that are defined by the 12, or some say 13, whatever, horoscope types are out there. And the fact is, those are very relatable, aggregated sets of traits. Whether you believe in planets or not, people have been paying attention to horoscopes for a long time, and it is an interesting way in to start building a character with these traits. And of course, they may have traits that buck a given astrological sign, but that is another way that I, as a writer, can take a look and sort of mud check my characters to see if they're ringing true and authentically. So a couple of ways that works.
So interesting. Can I
go for it?
Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned horoscopes. I'm writing my first novel right now, and I actually looked up the horoscopes for all of my main characters, which was funny. But something you said was really interesting. In terms of your process, it almost sounds like you're saying when you were an actor, you bring yourself to the role and you allow yourself to be directed in whatever way is appropriate. And yet what I'm hearing is that as a writer, you are actually becoming the director. You're becoming the director, bringing the actors in and figuring out what you want them to do. And it's almost like a similar relationship, but from the other end. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, that's dead ass fair. Definitely is
Okay.
absolutely the case. Because whether it's a screenplay or a novel, I am for the moment the director until people start giving notes and saying we would like to include this idea or uninclude that idea. So those are the times when I, as a writer, am having my say. But I must see it. I must hear what's happening, and that's one of the processes that I really enjoy, is that auteur moment that goes away the minute it starts getting optioned or bought. But the novels I keep pretty close to my vest. I don't necessarily have a ton of structural input or character input at this place. It's kind of a going concern when you're 6 titles in.
So one more question, and I'll turn it over to you because I know you have a lot. When you are writing your novels, I mean, when you're writing your scripts, your screenplays, obviously you're visualizing whatever it is on screen or stage. When you're writing your novels, do you also visualize it as if it is a movie? Is it the Ben Blackshaw movie that you're visualizing, or is it more literary, and then you're in more of a creator mode or something?
It's a little of both. So, for instance, Scott Smith, who wrote A Simple Plan, his novel ends one way, the movie ends a different way. So, while I am, in a way, when I'm adapting a book that I've written into a screenplay, one could say that I trust the process that brought the book to life. But I am open to making changes that might seem significant, might not, to some, when they're moving from book to script. So that's one way that the process works. But I think I could look at the novel as a very detailed storyboard with that in the process of shooting, changes are made. Change. It's the name of the game. Make it crazy, but that's part of it. So I'd say you've got a very clear line of this process. It's directorial. It's a bit of the auteur with the books. I can sort of fight harder for the way I want the books to come out. I do receive emails from readers who might have a problem with something. There was a character, turns out a beloved character, very much at risk after one of the books, and there was some hate mail because it seemed as though that character was dead. And between us, the character was dead, but the character because of the email. So it was not too awkward. It wasn't sort of like bringing Sherlock Holmes back to life after he'd fallen down a big cataract waterfall in Germany or something. But it, I could pull off a resurrection. And I think culturally now, as story receivers, we've seen enough of folks come back to life. I haven't thrown in a twin, but from daytime dramas, people come back to life. They weren't actually dead. They were away. People are recast. The characters are recast. So I think that readers are a little bit more flexible than they might have been. And I think I covered my tracks pretty well.
Now, that's super, super interesting. Having that sort of relationship with your audience where the kind of response from them is able to shape things in the future. Do you think that is how do you look at that? Do you look at that as sort of a community thing with your readers? Do you feel pressured to fit what your readers' hopes are? Is it a little bit of both?
I do know authors that crowdsource a lot of decisions, be it on X or Facebook, and character names. What's a character name who's kind of like this from this age or this decade? And I think that partly they're crowdsourcing to gin up engagement for a later purchase and interest in the novel that they might have helped craft or had some input in. and that's fine. I don't typically do that. I find that, you know, I trust my process. I trust that I'm doing well. I trust that um, I'm not going to give the reader exactly what they've asked for or demanded, and I don't respond to every suggestion. But you know, a certain count of emails that sound similar, I pay attention to. I'd be crazy not to, because you know, I'm in this process as well. I'm learning as well. I may know a lot of the main characters in the Blackshaw books, um, and know them, feel like I know them intimately. But if somebody said it doesn't feel right that this character would do thus and such, I'm open to being checked a little bit, and so I'll at least give it a look.
That is really fascinating. I had a very similar experience with my. I've just had a film that I've written and directed, short film,
Right.
and there was a moment with an actor on set who brought something completely different than what I had intended when I wrote
Mhm.
this beat, and I went, oh, that's what I meant when I wrote that.
Oh.
It's so it sounds like something similar there, which is really interesting.
Were
Um,
that moment was the actor circling what you had intended, but they nailed it?
it was just the reading of or the intention of that character in that moment was completely different from what I thought the character was going for in that moment. I had a moment where when I'd written it, it felt more aggressive, it felt more targeted, and the way that it was presented by that actor was instead very calculated and sort of pulled back and reserved, which was fascinating and I think enhanced.
Like an intonation kind of thing.
Yes,
Hmm.
just in how they delivered that moment.
Yeah.
Wonderful. The collaborative process can go on and on and on, especially in film, where the editor is going to have their crack at it as well. So that's very interesting to be able to do that and to hear hear a possibility that you hadn't fully envisioned or fleshed out before. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking about film, you quick little segue. When you started doing writing, you went first in the screenwriting route, and you took your screenplays. Correct me if I'm wrong. You started taking them to film festivals for the screenplay competition sort of side of the festivals, and you did really well. You won at Hampton International, Hudson Valley. What I'm curious, when you made that decision that you were going to start writing, that you were going to do these screenplays, what led you to deciding that festivals was the route that you wanted to go to get attention for them, and to, or was it about getting the attention? What was your process for that?
Well, the decision to write a screenplay is mercenary. It's money, Kyle. Money. So there's that. Getting into film festivals and submitting to them was part of the process, just to see how the reader that was not a relative would respond to them,
Right.
and how if it did sort of rise up in the standings and the bracket, as it were, just to see how far it might go, and take it from there. So it was a bit of a proof of concept to float it out in that direction. Most people who write screenplays are not selling those directly to the public. A screenplay is more of a business to business plan, whereas a book is definitely business to public kind of situation. So I wanted to float the screenplays in a more of a professional milieu, if that makes sense. Um, and then the books, you know, there's all the research that goes on in the books and screenplays, and trusting my gut a little bit more, as well as the editor's response as well.
So, um, you're from the Eastern Shore,
That's correct. Yes.
and the Ben Blackshaw series is set in the Eastern Shore,
More,
and
it's more in the Chesapeake
in the
Bay.
Chesapeake Bay. You're right, in that portion. Yes, it is. I actually learned a great deal of nautical terms when I was reading your books. It's not very often I have to look up words, so it's kind of cool for me. But I was wondering, when you're envisioning your scenes, your characters, etc., did you start with the landscape, with the setting, and then populate it, or did you start with a concept of what you wanted to do for this, the maritime thriller? And there's a lot that goes on. I mean, nuclear bombs and mercenaries, and there's just crazy stuff that happens. And do you start with that and then figure out how to adapt that to the setting? Like, how does that process work?
Well, I have to go back just a tiny bit farther to give a full answer to your question. I initially wrote Dead Rise to be a one-off, and did all requisite research on that. I went to Smith Island. I flew down to Tangier Island, which is kind of more on the Maryland-Virginia border, to get a sense of the people. I had wonderful watermen kind enough to take me around on Smith Island and make introductions to these wonderful old timers and listen to their stories. So I was at once on the actual land and hearing their voices, hearing their accents. I was also reading how other nonfiction writers wrote about Smith Island and truly captured some of the beauty of the place. And some of the expressions that crop up that are unique, that are harken back to the original Smith Islanders' time from coming from Cornwall, as they did. So it was, and the isolation of it just meant that these expressions were going to remain unchanged for a while, that their accent was going to remain purely theirs, and again harken back to a British or English accent in their ways. And there are a few good YouTube videos where if you just crank in Smith Island or Tangier Island and listen to them talk, and that's another part of the process. You realize that it's not, you can't be Mark Twain and write in a patois of the time anymore, and because that just slows a reader down these days. And so I had to do a little triage as to what expressions or what ways of talking, because I'm not going to write arster all the time for oil. People are just going to like blow a fuse every time their eye crosses that word. But when somebody is described as being unpleasant, and they're said that they're mean as a Kaiser, that's Kaiser Wilhelm they're talking about, and that's how far back that expression goes. Or if something has exploded or burned, it's burnt to matchsticks or something. So there's a lot of research that goes on, but discovering that that Dead Rise was not a one-off, that it was going to be a new series, that I was at least going to write a trilogy or something like that. That was interesting, because then I could dive in a little deeper and range a little farther afield for ideas, for character types. So it is a combination. Coming from the Eastern Shore, you hear about and you visit Smith Island often enough, and I had read a book set supposedly on Tangier Island that I felt was fictional, but it felt very disrespectful. And I'm not going to name the book or the author just because I don't want to. But it felt disrespectful, and I felt like I had to jump in there and tell a real fiction story about these people and their cussedness and their courage and their determination and their just toughness. I wanted to show that, and that they weren't backward because they were isolated. They had survived on these islands, just taking mostly from the Chesapeake Bay itself for their sustenance. And I felt defensive on their behalf. So that's when Dead Rise really came into being, and after that, more books followed.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love how you became so immersed in the culture and related with the community and the people, that it seems almost like you're a self-adopted and self-anointed member of that community, so
They
that you do feel the need to portray it accurately.
very much so, very much so. And they were kind enough to, one of the ways they've said thank you is they made the Ben Blackshaw series the first books of the Smith Island Book Club. So that was pretty cool when they inaugurated that. And that made me feel like I was getting things right without, taking the piss out of people for who they are and where they live and how they live. That I was giving an authentic portrayal within the structure of a yarn, essentially, an exciting action adventure yarn.
Yeah. I have a broader process question about writing. I'm not sure if you told me or if I read it somewhere, but there was a time when you definitely said you try to write 5,000 words a day, which for those who don't write is an awful lot of words to write in a day. And I had a question about that. And I know that you're not writing when you're editing, or something like that. But if you're writing a novel, you write the novel and then there's editing, and you're not going to do 5,000 words a day. But I did have a question about putting out that much content. How much of it ends up being used, and how do you know when you're writing it, or do you use it all? I mean, do you have a stream of consciousness that you just everything comes out, or do you have that storyline, or what does the actual functional writing process look like for you?
I was pretty chill writing Dead Rise, the first draft of Dead Rise, and I asked a friend who's an agent, and I said, how many pages? And he said, I don't know, 350, 400. So down the road a piece, I gave him 400 pages, and you make a submission, exactly when the manuscript is going to land on the desk or be shot through the email. And so I was waiting for some kind of feedback, and I was going to allow a month or 2 months or whatever for the read to take place, because my work is entering a to be read pile. But he called me back in like a day. He said, dude, I said 400 pages, double space, not single space. I sent over a doorstep with probably a whole drum of toner or whatever in it. And so I was corrected, and I had some serious editing to do at that point. But I was familiar with the concept that if one is to do a franchise or to create a character like Jack Reacher or John D. McDonald's character in his time, one has to publish annually. So then I was in a bit of a panic, because the second book, I said, all right, the fastest way into my second book is to write a second Blackshaw thriller. So what I'm going to do is keep a lot of the same characters, write some new ones, but I have a deadline now. And in order to publish within 12 months of the release of Dead Rise, I made a decision to do 10 pages a day, 5 days a week. And that would give me a rough draft in about, I don't know, 3 months, 4 months of really hard, balls out, straight up hard writing, like rough draft. And then I would probably take about as much time to do an editorial pass on it. I'm not a person who's got that golden first chapter where I'll keep rewriting it and rewriting it and rewriting it. And I don't have a beginning and a middle and an end to deal with. So that was the process. It wasn't so much, and if I may have misspoken about 5,000 pages a day, or I may have just been bragging to my friend, but it was 5,000 words a day. Yeah.
Or I might have taken your 10 pages and just extrapolated 5,000 words, because.
Well, that's pretty vicious.
Yeah.
That is pretty vicious. So yeah, I tried that for Nitro Express. It was exhausting. That's the second book in the story. And I find now that a page count is better for me as part of my process. And if I'm feeling like I'm lagging behind, I might lean a little more heavily on dialogue, which has a lot more white space on a given page. So that can happen.
It's an
Just,
author cheat.
yeah, that can happen. I've seen authors, sort of lapse into that in their later years of writing as well. The dialogue is fun to write. It's easy to write. It's just stand up and say crap back to each other. But for me, I still want it to be substantive, and I still want it to move the plot forward. I still want there to be some fantastic revelations from the dialogue. So it's not like, waiting for Godot and hobnobbing for a while. It's got to be in service of story. So yeah, so 5 pages a day, 5 days a week. If I come up short at some point, it might mean I extend, like if I do 3 pages one day because life commitments intrude, then I'll do 6 for the next 2 days, just to sort of get evened out. And that way I can have a decent weekend knowing that I've put in the work and, that things are going well, and I'm going to have a rough draft. I can point to the calendar and say, I will have a rough draft by this time. And that's a feeling of relief, because stretching it out, waiting for inspiration, my butt needs to be in the chair, and that's where the inspiration happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's super fascinating. And I was going to ask you about that inspiration and what do you do on those days where it's you go to sit down and it's just like, I don't have anything good today. I know in my screenwriting, I have some days where it's like, I'll sit down and I'll do 20 pages and I'm like, I can keep on going. And then there's other days where you'll sit down and I'll go, I have no idea what my next stage direction would even look like.
I have 2 supports for that. One is I keep my chapters very short and very cinematic. And if I'm drying, I can say, well, this is where the chapter ends. I write some sort of pithy final line of the paragraph I'm on, and then I start a new chapter. So that's one way to handle it, is just keep the, I'm not, while I do have a 5 page per day count, I'm not saying that each of those 5 pages must be a chapter. They can flop over from one chapter into the next. So that's one thing to do. Another thing is just remember the senses, and that basically we're all locked up in our craniums, and our senses are our only contact with the outside world. But more to the point, it's our emotions are transmitted up into here through those senses, and we've got to make an emotional connection with people. So those are 2 ways that it's very important to kind of keep to the page count, but not necessarily to a word count or to a chapter count.
In all the research you do, and your research is very immersive, what is the most bizarre thing that you've discovered? Like, what is the absolute most bizarre thing you've discovered in researching, particularly the Ben Blackshaw series?
See, this is the thing. As an author, I love the world and I love the people. So when I find something that's interesting, I love including it. I am fascinated by the fact that they that the guys have been working the Chesapeake Bay for 300 some years, and that they had a turtle harvesting business for like 2 years. Only 2 years, because turtles don't reproduce enough to support a market attack. I marvel that, for instance, the fowling pieces that Smith Islanders would use to get waterfowl. It's remarkable that, were you in England, there would be very well-known companies making these beautiful fowling pieces that are, the end of the barrel's like that, and they are, muzzle loaders essentially. And so then to discover that the Smith Islanders made even bigger cannons out of welded up pipe, and I mean, it's just astounding to me. And they were so proficient at at their hunting that basically they were supplying the eastern seaboard with oysters, clams, ducks, geese. Radically, they could, the term is mohawk, they could mohawk 50 ducks out of the air with one of those shots. They call them headache guns for a reason. So I like the historicity of it. And maybe that is maybe not so much bizarre, but it's just, I love these interesting factoids about how the 15th and 16th century was brought onto our shores. And until the Martin Wildlife Refuge was carved out of their usual hunting grounds to the north of Smith Island, to the north of Ewell, technically the little hamlet of Ewell, that's where they would hunt. That's where they would fish. They would. It was an amazing existence that was curtailed year by year by year, where less and less of the land that they could work and walk, and more laws imposed about catch sizes when they were on the water. How it's just been driven into a level of difficulty that when the prison was opened on the Eastern Shore, offering secure jobs and a steady income, that a lot of people, that was a main part of the Smith Island diaspora, was when they went to work at the prison facility that's on the Eastern Shore. So there, I'm racking my mind for bizarre, but I'm just finding.
Yeah, maybe unusual
Yeah.
would have been a better term, and I think you've really identified several there. I'd forgotten about the big gun in the book. I have just two more questions on this, so, and then I'll let you do your thing.
Go for it.
One is just kind of a silly question, and that is, literally, if you could be Ben Blackshaw for a day, if you could just embody the character as if it was an actual living, breathing person.
Sure.
What is the one thing you would want to do that you, as Robert Blake Whitehill, would never do?
I think a full 12 hours of oystering or tonging for oysters, or using the patent tongs, the pneumatic tongs. I think a 12-hour day of that would just knock me on my butt. So the likelihood of my actually doing that, as opposed to going out with and observing, I think that would be something very special. But then there's that sort of pyromaniacal side that says, I would like to paddle out into or towards some ducks and geese and pot away at them with this huge punt gun that's like 12, 13 feet long, and touch it off and just feel the entire little boat just get sent back 3 feet from that. That would be entertaining. Of course, I'd feel terrible about killing ducks, but I have no problem with hunting, but maybe it's not for me. But still, that would be quite an experience. It's just, it's a rich and varied life that most of us have no idea how difficult it is. And I think I would like to experience that, to dive into that world and experience, how they made their living. If they missed their shot, they didn't eat. And that's a very real thing that I don't think too many of us experience. And so that's very interesting for me.
That's more subsistence style. So the last question that I have is a little more personal. And, you and I went to school together. We went to a Quaker high school, and Quakers, for those who are not familiar with it, they live lives of simplicity and integrity and peace and stewardship, equity. And your books definitely have stewardship and equity, but not so much the whole, nonviolence, peace, simplicity thing. And I'm wondering, what is your process for reconciling that? Do you just disconnect yourself from that, or how does that process work for you on a more personal level?
Well, I like simplicity very much and admire it. But one of the things, I might just be simply crackers, and I have to acknowledge that side that I'm writing in ways that are akin to some of the stories that I consume. I love action adventure stories. I like thrillers, whether it's in the movie theater or in book form. And I have to acknowledge that part of me that I'm drawn to that. I think there's a part of me that's a little numb somehow, and I need the loud flashes and the bangs and the blood curdling violence that is exemplified in other areas of my life. I worked on an ambulance for 9 years here, and there was an adrenal quality to that. And I think that it takes a bit to make me interested, focused, and to want to be creative. I couldn't write remembrance of things past in that sort of Proustian way, but I can give nods to it in the books here and there. But I think I'm not necessarily writing who I am. I'm writing kind of what I like, if that makes any difference or makes any sense. We all talked about character at one point in an earlier conversation, and I mentioned that the most interesting characters are the ones where we as readers or audience members, we understand that they come in two parts. There's the part of what they want. We have to make that decision as authors. And then there's the part inside that's what they need, what they truly need as characters. And I think I may be bifurcated in that way too. And I think the most interesting characters are the ones where, if you imagine a circle, the need and the want are as diametrically opposite as possible. So I may be at meeting for worship on Sunday, but I may be writing something crazy that's got some violence, gunpowder, blood, what have you, come Monday or Tuesday. And I think there's just answering two distinct parts of who I am. So I don't think Quakerism is one part and the rest is an anomaly. Otherwise, I'd have to say that I'm a terrible Quaker. But I think that those parts are coexisting within me. And I appreciate the question very much because it helps me kind of reaffirm that, that's who I am at the moment. And that's how it is.
I love that answer.
I love that too.
I love that. And people are not simple two-dimensional characters. We're multidimensional and we're complex. So
and it also ties back to the acting with, what you want and what you need, which oftentimes for actors is, listed as your objective in the scene, and then you're super objective as a person and in your core being. So that was really, really fascinating. I want to turn to Defiant.
Sure.
Now I'm really interested in this because this is a graphic novel that's going to become a feature film, and it's the story of Robert Smalls, who to me is arguably the greatest American badass in history.
Isn't he though?
He's incredible, and I've heard you speak on him a little bit, and I think that you can do it better. So I would love for you for people who don't know his story, for you to tell us a little bit about Robert Smalls, and also what drew you to telling his story.
Well, I think the badassery is an immediate attractant to me, and I think Robert Smalls, he was born into slavery in Beaufort, South Carolina, to the house, the mansion, the plantation of one Robert McKee, where he was raised, and he tended to sometimes get in trouble around town, staying out past curfew. And so McKee, ostensibly his owner, decided that he would do something that I wasn't familiar with. He would rent Robert Smalls out to Charleston, South Carolina's harbor master. And Smalls was working on down at the wharf. He would eventually transport pilots who were bringing ships into very complex waters. There are about 5 rivers that go into Charleston Harbor, and they needed the bigger ships once the transatlantic or trans-Caribbean crossing had been made, they needed, as many harbors today still do, they needed pilots to come aboard, to be brought aboard, and navigate the ship through the more nuanced shoals, reefs, snags of the harbor. So Smalls is doing that work. Eventually became, they wouldn't call him a pilot because he was enslaved, so they called him a wheelman. And he was a wheelman on a ship called the Planter. And when the Civil War broke out right in front of him at Fort Sumter in the harbor of Charleston, he witnessed that, and he immediately was pressed into the work on the now CSS Planter. It was made into a gun and transport ship, and he was now the pilot of that ship. Time passed. Fort Sumter was abandoned by the Union, and he looked around. He had made an effort to try to buy his wife's freedom, the freedom of their child, and his own freedom, and he was laughed at, and he was told that there was no way that was going to happen, even though he was making extra money buying, let's say, candies or tobacco farther away from the harbor, and then bringing them down to the harbor to sell to sailors at a bit of a markup. So he's trying to save money that way. Didn't work out. Couldn't save enough. So eventually he says, and this is in May, early on in the war, one night he has said, enough. And he brings his family, the family of the enslaved crew, and the enslaved crew, and he puts them aboard this ship, the Planter, a 160-foot gunship, and he steals it, dead of night. He's got to get this ship out to the Union blockade, just 6-7 miles off, but he's got to get past numerous gun batteries that are there to defend the harbor against a Union attack. And he manages to do this. He delivers 4 old Union guns that were still aboard the ship. He delivers all of these people safely, and it's pretty much a miracle. He becomes the talk of the town. Everybody, he's written up in newspapers. He's kind of like Chris Kyle meets Audie Murphy of the time. It was quite a story. He brings the ship then to Port Royal for a refit, and this is where my family comes in. My aunt, Annie Haycock, was part of the Port Royal experiment, where Philadelphia area educators and doctors went down to work with formerly enslaved people who had essentially been abandoned by their plantation owners, who just bailed out and said, we don't want to deal. The Union's coming down fast down the coast. We're out. And so the Port Royal experiment, of which my great aunt was a participant, was there to educate the formerly enslaved people in how to run the plantation themselves now that it had been left to them. So it's really interesting. He is made captain. Robert Smalls, back to him. He's made captain of the ship that he stole. He's America's first Black military captain. He eventually fights in 17 additional battles, harrowing battles, life and death situations. But he's actually present at Fort Sumter at the end of the war when they finally strike the Confederate, and he buys, with the spoils of having brought in a ship that was struck to salvage, he buys his former master's mansion, and he moves his family from the slave quarters into the mansion itself. Who should walk up? Stagger up might be a better way of putting it. Who should stagger up to the front door of the only address she can remember? She's in rags. She might have a bit of dementia, but his former master's wife. And they take her in, and they take care of her for the rest of her life. He's elected to Congress 5 times. He didn't break into the Capitol. He was voted in 5 times. This guy is amazing. He helped start public schools, free, compulsory, not segregated public schools in South Carolina. So we have a public school system today. If we still manage to have it, it is in no small part thanks to Robert Smalls. It's an incredible life. I know I digressed a bit in telling his story, but what a life to want to write about.
Yeah, I mean, he is just one of the most fascinating people to have ever lived. And it's frustrating that his story is not told more often and more more
It's not taught in
regularly
schools.
In schools.
Yeah.
And so you taking this on, and I know that something that you talked about with the graphic novel is that you're making it for educators. You make it free to get a copy. Is that right?
I'm working with a company called Legion M, and Rob Edwards is the guy who actually wrote the graphic novel. So we're a team in that way. And you'll see my name on the masthead inside the graphic novel. But he's the guy that wrote this wonderful story, illuminating more of his childhood on into his later life. In a graphic novel, you've got the room and the space to do that. So Legion M took on this project with Rob Edwards, and the graphic novel is now finished. It's in its second printing, and it's sold out at least once in Amazon. It's been a bestseller in multiple categories already. But to your point, it is free to educators and librarians now, so that they can get a sense of it and see if it might be something that might appeal for young people. There's also a free downloadable teacher's guide that goes with it. And I said, he is, to use your word, he's badass. What an inspiring story to come out from under institutionalized slavery and rise to the halls of Congress. What a journey. Who has had that journey? And to your point again, why don't we know about him?
Yeah.
Exactly. And you're doing the work to help people know more about him. And I think that is wonderful.
Yeah.
I think pulling back just a little bit, it's interesting. There seems to be a common thread in the stories that you like to tell with these underdog people who are either disenfranchised, enslaved, working class people facing huge odds, and also having that common thread of a sort of a maritime theme. Do you think that comes from your upbringing, from where you live now? What do you think draws you to these common themes?
No, I definitely think the water plays a part. In fact, I was over at the Annapolis Maritime Museum a while back talking about the water side of the Underground Railroad, and how in many instances escapes by water were crucial. And I culminate that talk describing what Robert Smalls did. So yes, I think that the Chesapeake, some writers say that they've got ink in their veins. I think that I've got brackish water in mine, Chesapeake, and I love writing about boats. I haven't written exhaustively. Well, there are some aircraft in there, and I love to fly, so I'll include those modes of transport as well. But definitely an underdog who makes good, who rises to the occasion. And as far as Blackshaw goes, who rises to the occasion and yet remains humble, and he may want to survive the day, but he needs the peace and quiet that a life on the Chesapeake was supposed to offer him, and always seems to be denied him. And Robert Smalls, his life just expanded so greatly from that singular act of courage, between all of his exploits in wartime, his exploits during Reconstruction and peacetime. What a remarkable person. And I just have such admiration for people like that, and a privilege to know some people like that on Smith Island.
Yeah, it's interesting as you mentioned that there's a little bit of a parallel that just jumped out at me. You talked about Robert Smalls and how this is one act led to so much more, such a diverse array of activities. And I couldn't help just suddenly getting the idea that when you wrote Dead Rise, that also was a single act, which you said was supposed to be standalone, which has led to, you have multiple projects going on. I didn't mention that you were an ambulance driver, you have a pilot's license. You've done so much, and you continue to do so much. You've got these projects, you've got multiple projects ongoing. Yeah. And I feel like there's a little bit of a parallel there, which is kind of cool. I hadn't thought about before. So that's interesting.
That is very interesting. So maybe there are aspects of my life that are expanding from a younger time. I would have to say, yeah, dead on right.
I wanna build on that. I'm very regularly on IMDb, just with film and everything. And I thought I'd look you up before we talked, and I was I don't know if the right word is terrified, but I was blown away. You've got about a dozen different projects that are like in production at some stage in development. You've got the Blackshaw film adaptations. You've got Defiant. I saw something about an Edgar Allan Poe project. There's so I'm so curious about how you balance having so many different projects uh, all at once.
Especially such a diverse array of projects as
Exactly.
well. I mean, you're writing novels, you're doing screenplays, you're doing films. I mean, it's a lot.
I think part of it is that I have had a very intensive creative time, and I think that I can smell a little smoke, and that's the aroma of burnout. And so, in keeping with your book, Allie, I'm gentling up a little bit in terms of the pace and taking a little more time between projects and relaxing a little bit more. And I think reading your book was tremendously illuminating as far as the need for that, and that it is, it is a defensible stance to say, I'm chilling out, I'm thinking about the project, but I'm not at the keyboard every minute, every day. So I owe you for that, for sure.
Well, thank you for that. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
and I will get back to a more intensive writing schedule. I have a Blackshaw book that I'm still cogitating, several scripts, that I'm not sure about how to finish non-Blackshaw adaptations. So I'm just taking a step back at the moment. And I have a feeling that come January, things are going to ramp up again. And so this is a note-taking, a cogitating mini sabbatical.
I actually love that, and you're absolutely right, and I appreciate you mentioning it, because we do get caught up in production, but it is very important to take that time to recreate, recharge, restore, play the pause in the music, so that we have a balanced piece. So
And you do the very important necessity of not identifying so strongly with your work, such that not doing the work, or you need to step back from the work, you are suddenly rudderless and you don't know who you are. If you need to step away from the thing that you identify yourself with all the time.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
getting a bit, yeah.
Got to embrace your inner fabulosity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That is really, really interesting. And I think that kind of draws a common thread throughout this entire talk, starting with the acting, and then what Ali said about the transition in your writing almost being from a director standpoint, and everything that you talked about from the extensive research that you do to sort of putting the pieces together and verbalizing things and trying to find how everything works together. It almost feels like your entire writing process is, in a way, very like running in parallel to the process of a theater or a film director, in just how you go about it. And now just what you said about taking the step away so that you can recreate and think.
Yeah, because there's also not just immersing yourself in the character and the culture and doing the research, which you do as an actor, but also taking that feedback. You talked about the plethora of emails that encouraged you to shift a little bit how you had approached a character's untimely almost passing, and that give and take, which is also very much, it's like your process is very much a result of maybe those years you spent at RADA, and really in approaching all of your artwork in an immersive and very interactive, interpersonal way, which is super interesting. Not everybody does that.
No, but I was listening to an interview this morning with John, was it Oates, with Hall and Oates? What's his first name?
Yeah.
And he was talking about, he says his creativity, he feels, has a timestamp on it, and he wants to charge ahead and much as he can. He's done like 7 solo albums, and he's 77 years old, and he's still at it. And I respect that. There must have been a little downtime that allows him to refresh. But while I know people that drive hard and drive themselves very hard, it's been, and I wanted to think of myself as a person like that. But after 6 books and a lot of screenplays, I think I'm not that guy, and I need to take just some thinking time. I'm confident when I sit down to the keyboard that all the minutia, the details, the fun stuff that I like to put in, it's all going to emerge. It will all be there. But I need a little time away to sort of regenerate that terror that, oh, maybe it won't be there. I better get back to it.
I think that's a really important point, Robert, because there's the old quote, "Know thyself." And
Yeah.
you talked about how that 40-minute commute into the city just wasn't you. You're a homebody, and you couldn't do the acting. And I feel like knowing yourself and listening to yourself, your inner self, is going to, it's one of your strengths. It's one of your superpowers. And it's going to really help you achieve the best that you can achieve. Not the most, but the best that you can achieve. And I think that's a really powerful and beautiful thing.
Great distinction. Not the best, not the most. And I think, conversations like this, they might be for your readership and your audience and your listeners, but they really help me a great deal, especially with the kind of writing that you're doing, Allie, and to be able to watch Allie brag about you, Kyle, and all your rise and your accomplishments and notices. I love conversations like this. So important.
We do too. That's why we're so glad to have you here on So What's Your Process?
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I think as we wrap up, is there anything that you've got happening right now that you'd like to plug with our audience? Anything you want to share? Things that they want to take a look at? The floor is yours.
I think things that they can enjoy immediately that I'm working on are the Blackshaw thrillers. They are, the first 3 are now available on Audible. They have a virtual reader, which I think is kind of interesting and does a pretty good job. Maybe not the best as some of the friends I know could read it. But for the moment, you can get the Blackshaw books in German, in English, on Kindle, and in print, and now on Audible. And maybe one day soon in a theater near you. But for the meantime, start the series off with Dead Rise. They're written to be one-off, standing alone stories. But there are little nuggets and Easter eggs that you can enjoy if you read them in the order they were written. So that would be the thing that I would encourage folks to do now.
I love that, and I would also second that. They can be read alone. I would encourage folks to read them in order, because there is a development of the characters and their personalities and relationships that's kind of beautiful, that I liked, in and among all the blood and gore. But also, when you're back to it in January, what should folks be on the lookout for? And also, how can folks find out more? How can they reach out to you? Where can they go for more info?
For an overview of me and my work process, wonderful interviews like this, which I'm going to splash all over social media. But I have a website, robertblakewhitehill.com. And on Facebook, I have 2 spots you could go to, which is Robert Whitehill, or the full name, again, Robert Blake Whitehill. And there's social media. I'm Robert Blake Whitehill on X, Instagram, as well. I can be found there, and those might range into more personal, less businessy sort of notes and remarks, but they're all spokes that lead into the hub of working with Blackshaw. And that's the thing that I can immediately tout as being ready, and just ready for consumption immediately. Come January, that's when I start the 7th Blackshaw book in earnest. So it'll probably be September of 26 before the 7th comes out. So you've got a little time, but not that much time to enjoy the 6 titles that I've got in the meantime.
Just enough time to get them all read.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, my friend, for being on So What's Your Process and sharing so much. We have really enjoyed having you on.
It's been a gift, a great pleasure. Thank you both so much, Kyle, Allie, just tremendous.
Thank you. All right.
Absolutely.
Bye
We'll
for
see ya.
now. Bye. So what did you think?
I thought Robert was amazing. I mean, I know that you two have known each other for a long time. I've met him once before, and we had a wonderful chat then. So getting to talk again and in detail this time about his work, it really reaffirmed a lot of things that I thought about him from that first chat. In the sense of his brilliance as a creative, and just so much care and passion that he puts towards his writing. I think the thing that really stuck out to me was how focused on truth and research he was with the Ben Blackshaw character, going to the locations that he was going to write about, being around people that this character would have been around. It has a really interesting common through line with acting. You know, as an actor, you go and you research the people that you're playing, the places that they've been, so that you can give a more truthful performance. And as a writer, of course, it makes sense that you have to do the same thing, because you're describing these places, these people, these times, and it's a fascinating through line for Robert specifically, as someone who started as an actor and transitioned into writing.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not just the work, but for me, it's also his life. Right. So he's got a really good work life balance ethic. The fact that he actually recognizes you need to have that. But also I feel as if his life is integral to the work, in the sense of bringing the work to life, if that makes sense. Like, he stands and he verbalizes. He stands in his, I'm sure you can get this image of him standing in his study and standing up and reading the text he's just written to see if it actually sounds like dialogue that would work. And when I first read his first book, is called Dead Rise, and when I first read that book, I very much saw what he was writing. It was very visually expressive. I could see it as if I was, watching a movie, and I could hear the dialogue, and it was very much brought to life. So, and I think that's all part of this intensive process that he has, that goes so much beyond just, Google research.
Yeah.
He flew down to Tangier Island. He went out oystering. He did all these things. He's a very hands-on researcher, which not a lot of people are. And, there's different processes, obviously, for different people. And I was just fascinated to hear how immersed he was in the entire soup to nuts of it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I'm definitely stealing the standing up and speaking the dialogue for when I'm working on my next screenplay. That's definitely something I'll be using.
There you go.
I also thought it was so cool just getting to hear, and I know the story of Robert Smalls, but I feel like so many people don't, and just having him, pretty much give us like the 10-minute spark notes, but in such depth and with such passion of this fascinating man's life, and the fact that not only is he, talking about him, but has created something that's going to be so helpful in sharing that story. And I think that graphic novels are actually a really, really great way to explore history. I know when I was in high school, there was a recently released graphic novel of the late John Lewis's life. And that really opened his story to so many people, which was really cool to see being part of that. And I think that this Robert Small story could be very similar, and of course translating that into a feature film soon is going to be really fascinating. I think could very well be a be an Oscar contender for Best Animated Film.
You know, so something for me that's really fascinating is, you know, I've known Robert for a long time, and so I first heard about the Robert Smalls project a couple 3 years ago. I'm not sure exactly when, and I didn't know who that was. And I was watching a talk that Robert was giving, and I don't know where it was. He was standing up in front of some crowd, and he was giving this talk, and he started talking about this new project. I was like, wow, this is so fascinating. And I started doing research on it. And this is a person who was hugely impactful, brave, and just such an amazing and compelling story. And I had never heard of it. And so I think that I don't think I'm out of the norm here. I don't think this is something people talk about, and I'm just thrilled that it's come to life in the graphic novel, that the movie's coming to pass, that, you know, he's talking about it more, that more and more people are talking about it, that it's going to be in schools. I think it's an important story to tell. You know, the Ben Blackshaw series are maritime thrillers. They are just, you know, they're exciting, they're gritty. I did a little book review on one of them. And they're just fun. You know, they're fun. You definitely learn a lot. I learned a ton about life in the Chesapeake, but it's a different kind of project. It's a different sort of endeavor. And I really love that he's pursuing this nonfiction side. And I think you're right. He's going to bring that acting and that fiction writing strength to it to make it really good. And can I just say also, I love that he finds use in my book. It made me so happy on a personal level.
It's awesome. It's really awesome. Well, that's the show, folks.
That's the show.
Thank you so much for joining us this week with our chat with Robert. And we're super excited to have you back next week because we've got another exciting guest.
Hey folks, Kyle and Allie from the future here, and you will not be seeing a new guest next week because next week is our season finale. Now on our season finale, we're going to do a Q&A episode. So if you head to our Instagram right now, you can find our little Q&A section where you can leave any questions you want to ask us, whether it's about guests we had on this season, whether it's about us, anything you want to know, and we'll answer those questions on our very last episode of the season coming out next week. Same time. Be sure to tune in, and thank you so much for all the support you've shown the show throughout this process.
In the meantime, make sure to follow us on social medias, subscribe wherever you're listening, and turn on your post notifications so that you never miss a new episode with us. And in the meantime, Allie,
stay tuned for the next. So, what's your process?
Bye-bye.